Good afternoon. For today's broadcast of the podcast, The Zuganators, we will be discussing the topic of why the United States is too politically correct. My name is Diego Cruz, and I will be your host for today's presentation of why the United States is too politically correct. My guest panel includes Tom Flavianos, Dylan Franceschi, and Jesse Rice. I hope that you enjoy this scintillating discussion about the politically correct culture developing in our country. Now, what exactly is political correctness? The practice of this topic seems to be the root of a desire to eliminate exclusion of various identity groups based on language usage, such as genders, race and ethnicity, and sexual orientation. The people that are offended by this view it as censorship of freedom of speech that places limits on debates in the public area. They further believe that political correctness perceives offensive language where none exists. Others believe that political correctness has been used as an epithet to stop legitimate attempts to curb hate speech and minimize exclusionary speech practices. Now, when was political correctness first used? The term political correctness was first used in Marxist-Leninist vocabulary in Russia. Even though the usage of the term back then doesn't mean the same as more recent usages, it was originally used in the late part of the 20th century. That was for the public use, but 1793 was the first time the government first used it. The Supreme Court, to be more specific, during a lawsuit case. So let's ask one of the members of our guest panel a question. Tom, why does an average of 80% of the younger population feel uncomfortable with political correctness?
An average of 80% of people under the age of 29 in all ethnicity are uncomfortable with political correctness. According to Reynolds from USA Today, he says, among the general population, a full 80% believe that political correctness is a problem in our country. The majority of people don't like political correctness for a reason they don't want to share. The woke minority consists of all ages. I personally think that the younger population feels uncomfortable because of the new expectations that people have to adapt to. These newly found expectations tend to scare people because it is out of their comfort zone. So when it's forced upon the entire community, the majority is introduced to it.
Thank you, Tom. Your response is really interesting. Now we head over to Dylan to hear his side. So first question for you, Dylan. Why do you feel that the media is misleading the public?
Media will have you believe that the whole country is divided, but most people don't care. According to Yashuka Monk, most Americans don't fit into either of these camps, the camps being for and against PC culture. The media is constantly misleading the public for clicks, like those YouTube videos labeled SJWs Destroyed would have you believe that most of the left is like that, but it's really just a small amount of crazy people. Also, the left media is guilty of the same stuff, spreading false information that the right is just a bunch of Nazis and hate groups.
Very interesting points there, Dylan. It's really a topic that has us concerned about political correctness. Now our next question is for Jesse. So Jesse, why do you feel that political correctness is going to the extreme?
Correctness is hitting a new level than it's ever been before. For example, Lionel Shriver says in his article, if an agent were to receive a manuscript from a gay transgender Caribbean who dropped out of school at 7 and powers around town on a mobility scooter, it would be published, even if its quality were execrable. This quote proves that political correctness is a problem. People are willing to publish anything in order to be inclusive and diverse, even if the article is terrible.
That's very good information about political correctness, Jesse. Now we go back to our first guest from earlier, Tom, to ask him a second question. So Tom, why does Facebook have a history for being a liberal company?
Facebook has a history for being a liberal company. According to Kate Conger from New York Times, she says, Palmer Luckey, the founder of Oculus, the maker of virtual reality goggles that Facebook acquired, was pressured to leave the company last year, months after news spread that he had secretly donated to an organization dedicated to spreading anti-Hillary Clinton internet memes. People who use Facebook often have information leaked and their opinions showed to the entire world. People often find the need to express their thoughts on this social media platform, thinking this will make an impact, when at the end, they seem foolish.
This is some very useful information on informing our listeners on political correctness. Now a question for Dylan. So Dylan, what is another example of the media trying to spread political correctness culture?
Media also pushes narratives that aren't represented correctly. This is a poll that uses loaded, pejorative wording in order to push respondents towards a specific response, according to Nolan. NPR used misleading questions.
That's a very interesting fact about the media, Dylan. Now a question for Jesse. How has political correctness affected comedy in modern-day society?
Political correctness has been an issue on humor. For example, Kyle Smith says in his article, on a crowded elevator in San Francisco in April, Richard Ned LeBeau was asked what floor he wanted. The 76-year-old professor from King's College London replied, "Ladies' lingerie." Turns out one of the people on the elevator was an easily triggered professor of gender studies at Merrimack College named Simona Shironi. Shironi formerly complained about LeBeau's misogyny to the host of the International Studies Association, a conference that both professors were attending at the time. Now the association is demanding LeBeau apologize on pain of disciplinary charges. That quote is helping my argument that PC culture is waging war on humor. It is commonly believed nowadays that comedy should be toned down to not offend people.
Nice points, Jesse. That's really good evidence. It's really interesting and a good example of the world being politically correct. This next question is for Tom. Why isn't Jimmy Carr's Netflix show not funny at all and only talks about political views?
Jimmy Carr's Netflix show isn't funny at all and only talks about political views. Ellie Buffkin from The Federalist states in their article that, as you may have already guessed, the show is depressingly not funny and is just a showcase for woke comedians like Nikki Glaser, D.L. Hewley, and Sarah Schaefer to show their very left-wing political views while getting screen time on Netflix. This quote states that the comedians would rather share their political views on a show than to actually entertain the viewers. The show is no source of entertainment for the people who enjoy the comedians' work because their left-wing political views is the main topic of the show.
Good evidence, Tom. It really helps us understand PC more. Now for Dylan's last question. How else has the media affected the PC culture nowadays?
Well, media pushes the use of a lot of PC language. Some language that was said in the article I read was, people aren't old anymore, they're elderly. People should be able to speak the words they want unless they are threatening.
Very good point, Dylan. That really is a big change in our society and how we speak. Now for Jesse's last question of this podcast. How far has political correctness gone with our society?
Political correctness has gone way too far. For example, David Schilling says in his article to Ellis, millennials are defined by their oversensitivity, their insistence that they're right despite the overwhelming proof that suggests they are not, their lack of placing things within context, the overreacting, the passive-aggressive positivity, and of course all this exasperated by the meds they've been fed since childhood, by overprotective helicopter parents mapping their every move. Millennials are misguided and are not helping anything. Millennials are the epitome of weak.
Very good information, Jesse. This concludes our podcast about why the United States is too politically correct. I want to thank my guests today, Tom, Dylan, and Jesse, for representing their point of views, defending them, and being respectful towards other people's opinions. I would like to now give each of you a chance to give our audience a closing statement on PC culture for ending of today's shows. Dylan, do you have anything left to say?
Nah, son, I'm good.
Okay, what about you, Tom? Anything to say?
Yeah, you can't just force a new way to live upon a community and expect people to be fine.
That's very true, Tom. Very wise words. Anything you have to say, Jesse?
No, I don't have anything to say.
Okay, this concludes the broadcast of the podcast of the Zuganators.